The voicemail came at 2:12 a.m. My father was gone. My wife had left 3 hours earlier. I'm Michael Barrett, 44 years old, and I manage contracts for a medical device company here in Charlotte. 3 weeks of juggling work calls from hospital chairs had taught me something about timing. Death doesn't wait for convenience. Neither does betrayal. The house felt different when I walked through the door. Not empty. Danielle's things were still there, but cold, like someone had opened all the windows and forgot to close them. I sat in the kitchen and played the message again. Dr. Martinez's voice was steady, professional. Mr. Barrett, I'm sorry to inform you that your father passed peacefully at 11:47 p.m. Peaceful, that word stuck with me. The silence in my house wasn't peaceful, it was calculated. Here's the thing about working in contract management. You learn to read between the lines. You notice when clauses don't match, when signatures look forced, when someone's behavior shifts right before they ask for something. Danielle had been shifting for weeks. It started the day the hospice nurse pulled me aside. Your father's entering final decline, she'd said. Maybe a week, possibly less. That night, Danielle announced she needed space. Not a conversation, an announcement. The next morning, she stopped coming to the hospital. Said the smell made her nauseous. Fair enough. Death has its own scent. But she also stopped cooking, stopped asking about Dad, started sleeping in the guest room. Her laptop used to stay open on the kitchen counter, browser tabs scattered like evidence of a normal life, shopping sites, work emails, social media. Suddenly, it was always closed, password protected, clean. I didn't ask questions. Maybe I should have. You know what the real tell was? She cleared her browser history. Completely. Who does that unless they're hiding something? Last Tuesday she got careless, left the laptop open while she showered. I wasn't snooping, just moving it to plug in my phone. The screen lit up. Flight confirmation, Charlotte to Miami. Departure Thursday morning. The same Thursday Dad died. I closed the laptop and waited. Maybe she'd tell me about a work trip, a family emergency, anything that made sense. She never mentioned it. Instead, she kissed my forehead Wednesday night and said, "I'll be back soon," like she was running to the grocery store. 3 hours before the hospital called, she was gone. I tried calling her after I got the news. Maybe she'd forgotten about the flight. Maybe she'd want to come back, be there for the funeral arrangements, be there for me. The call went straight to a message I'd never heard before. The number you have dialed is not available. Blocked. She'd blocked my number. I set the phone down and stared at it for a long time. 26 years of marriage, and I was blocked like a telemarketer. That's when I saw the Instagram notification on my tablet. Someone had tagged Danielle in a story. Sarah Jenkins, one of her college friends, who never quite grew up. The story was 6 hours old, poolside at some resort, champagne glasses catching sunlight, 2 people in the frame, toasting. Danielle looked relaxed, happy, like she'd just gotten good news. The man next to her was shirtless, grinning at the camera. Brad Morrison. Her ex from college, the one she claimed to have no contact with. The caption read, "Sometimes you just need to follow your heart. Miami vibes, new beginnings." I watched the story loop 3 times before it hit me. While I was listening to my father take his last breath, she was celebrating a new beginning with another man. The weird part? I didn't cry, didn't throw the tablet, didn't call her friends demanding explanations. I walked to my office and opened the locked drawer in my desk. Behind old contracts and warranty papers, I found what I was looking for, our prenuptial agreement. 14 years old, never referenced, almost forgotten. I'd insisted on it back then, not because I didn't trust her, but because I worked in contracts. I understood that people change, that good intentions don't survive bad circumstances. She'd signed it without reading it carefully. Most people do. I read every line that night, Every clause, every condition, every protection I'd built into our marriage without realizing I'd need them. The document was clear. Inheritance stays separate. Property acquired before marriage stays separate. Assets commingled require mutual consent and full disclosure. She'd never been on the deed to the house. Dad bought it for us as a wedding gift. But the trust paperwork kept it separate. She probably didn't even know. Sitting there in the dark, reading legal language by the light of my phone, I realized something. She hadn't just abandoned me during the worst moment of my life. She'd planned it, timed it, executed it while I was distracted by grief. That takes a special kind of coldness. But here's what she didn't know about contracts. They cut both ways. Every protection works in reverse. Every clause has consequences. I closed the prenup and put it back in the drawer. But I didn't lock it this time. Some things are easier to access when you know you'll need them again. She didn't show up at the funeral. But Sam did. My cousin Sam works as a trust officer at First National. He's the kind of man who shows up early and stays late, even when it's not required. Especially when it's not required. He found me after the service, standing by Dad's grave while everyone else filtered toward their cars. The cemetery was quiet except for the sound of dress shoes on gravel and car doors closing in the distance. "Michael," he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "Your father asked me to give this to you personally. Today." The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with my name written in Dad's careful handwriting. Nothing else. No instructions, no explanations. Inside were legal documents I wasn't expecting. A revocable trust agreement dated 2 months ago. Everything, the house, the savings, the investments, even the storage unit, had been transferred into a trust under my sole control. Dad's signature was notarized and witnessed. Official. 2 months ago was the same week Danielle started asking for space. Sam watched me read. He'd probably already seen the documents, knew what they meant. Trust officers don't hand out surprises they haven't reviewed. "He said you'd need this sooner than later," Sam said. Didn't explain why. I folded the papers and put them back in the envelope. Dad had always been 3 steps ahead. Even dying, he was still protecting me from something I didn't know I needed protection from. The drive home took 20 minutes. 20 minutes to wonder what Dad had seen that I'd missed. I got my answer when I checked my email that night. There was a message in my sent folder I didn't remember sending. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. 3 weeks ago. The subject line read, "Estate documentation request urgent." I opened it. The message was written in my style, using my professional tone. It requested sensitive financial documents from the estate accountant. Bank statements, asset summaries, trust details, everything someone would need to understand Dad's financial situation. The problem? I was at the hospital that night. Had been there since 6 p.m., sleeping in the chair next to Dad's bed. I checked the message details. The IP address traced back to my home network, not the hospital Wi-Fi. Someone had sent this from my house using my computer while I was sitting in a hospice room 30 minutes away. She didn't fake being me. She just used the parts of me I left lying around. My laptop autosaves passwords. Email stays logged in. To anyone with access to my computer, sending an email as me would be simple. Click, type, send. No hacking required. The estate accountant had responded promptly. Professional courtesy. When a son requests his dying father's financial information, you don't ask questions. You send the documents, all of them. I scrolled through the accountant's reply. Bank balances, investment portfolios, property values, a complete financial picture of everything Dad had built over 73 years. This wasn't curiosity. This was reconnaissance. She'd been positioning herself financially before Dad even died. While I was watching him struggle to breathe, she was calculating what his death would be worth. That realization settled in my chest like cold water. But if she wanted to play financial games, she'd picked the wrong opponent. Contract management teaches you to follow money trails. You learn that every transaction tells a story, and every story has gaps. I pulled up our joint bank account and started looking for gaps. 3 weeks of statements showed a pattern I'd missed while dealing with hospice schedules and medical decisions. Regular transfers. Always the same amount, $950, 0 cents. 3 times a week. Every week. The recipient was listed as D. James, her maiden name. The platform was Zelle, which meant the money moved instantly. No delays, no holds, no paper trail that would trigger automatic review. Here's what most people don't know about banking regulations. $1,000, 0 cents triggers documentation requirements. Anything under that amount gets processed without additional scrutiny. She'd done her homework. $950, 0 cents doesn't trigger flags, but 18 of them in a month will make someone ask questions. I opened a spreadsheet and started calculating. 6 weeks of transfers, 3 per week. The total was $17,100, 0 cents, moved quietly out of our joint account while I was focused on keeping Dad comfortable. But where was it going? The Zelle records showed the money was being forwarded to a Revolut account. I had heard of Revolut digital banking, mostly used for international transfers, the kind of platform that makes it easy to move money offshore without traditional banking oversight. A quick search showed the account was registered in the Cayman Islands. She'd been preparing for a new life with money she planned to steal. The pieces were fitting together like clauses in a contract. The email reconnaissance, the gradual money transfers, the Miami trip with her ex. This wasn't a spontaneous breakdown or emotional affair. This was an exit strategy. I sat back in my chair and considered my options. I could call her, demand explanations, threaten legal action, make noise, create drama, fight publicly. Or I could do what I do best, read the fine print and use it. The next morning, I called David Richardson. Dave runs a family law practice downtown, handles high-asset divorces with the same precision most lawyers reserve for corporate mergers. Discreet, thorough, expensive. His office overlooks the courthouse. Symbolic, he'd once told me. Reminds clients that every decision has consequences. "Michael," he said, reviewing the trust documents and bank statements I'd brought. "This is more straightforward than you might think." Dave explained the mathematics of North Carolina law. Inheritance stays separate property unless explicitly commingled. The house was purchased with trust money before the marriage, never transferred to joint ownership. The joint account was the only shared asset. "She has no claim to the trust, the house, or your father's estate," he said. "But the unauthorized transfers create grounds for separation based on financial misconduct." We filed the paperwork that afternoon. Legal separation citing betrayal and financial concealment. The prenup made it simple. Clear language, unambiguous terms. Ironclad protections I'd built 14 years ago without knowing I'd need them. Dave also petitioned for immediate asset protection, freezing any shared accounts pending forensic review, standard procedure when financial misconduct is suspected. "In North Carolina, inheritance stays separate," Dave explained as we finished the paperwork. "The house? Bought with trust money. Her name was never on the deed. She just didn't know that meant something." The filing would be processed within 48 hours. By Thursday, she'd discovered that her access to our joint account had been suspended. Her Cayman Island fund would stop growing. The exit strategy she'd spent 6 weeks building would hit a wall. I drove home through downtown Charlotte, past the hospital where Dad had died, past the cemetery where we buried him that morning. The city looked the same, but something had shifted. For 3 weeks, I'd been reacting to Dad's decline, to Danielle's coldness, to the slow dissolution of everything I thought was stable. Now, I was planning. That night, I sat in Dad's chair and looked through the trust documents again. Every page was a reminder that he'd seen this coming. Somehow, he'd known she'd choose the worst possible moment to reveal who she really was. Maybe that's what 26 years of marriage teaches you, not to trust blindly, but to protect quietly. The trust was bulletproof. The house was secure. The joint account was frozen. She'd wanted freedom. I'd given her exactly what she'd asked for. Just not the way she'd planned to get it. I didn't raise my voice. I rewrote the plan. Monday morning brought clarity, the way coffee brings focus, gradual, then complete. Dave Richardson's legal filing had frozen our joint account over the weekend. By 9 a.m., Danielle would discover her Cayman pipeline had been severed. But freezing the money was just damage control. I wanted consequences. The IRS building in Charlotte sits on South Tryon Street, a gray concrete monument to federal authority. I'd driven past it 1,000 times without thinking about it. Today it felt like a tool I'd finally learned how to use. Form 3949A. Information Referral. The IRS uses it to investigate suspected tax violations reported by citizens. Most people don't know it exists. Most people don't need to. I printed the form at my office and filled it out by hand. Clean block letters, like the contracts I review every day. No emotion, just facts. Taxpayer name, Danielle James Barrett. Social Security number, last known address. The basics. Violation type. Offshore structuring and undeclared income. Failure to report foreign financial accounts. Supporting documentation. 18 Zelle transfers totaling $17,100.00, routed to an undisclosed Revolut account in the Cayman Islands. Email evidence showing unauthorized access to estate financial records. Bank statements proving systematic asset concealment. She thought changing her last name back erased the trail. But every account has an origin story. The Revolut account was opened using her maiden name, but the funding came from our joint account under her married name. The IRS has software designed to catch exactly this kind of pattern. Money doesn't disappear, it just changes addresses. I attached copies of everything. The estate accountant's email response showing financial documents she'd requested using my credentials, the Zelle transaction history, the Revolut account details I'd traced through their customer service department. The package was thorough, professional, devastating. The IRS processes information referrals within 30 days, sometimes faster when the documentation is comprehensive, sometimes much faster when offshore accounts are involved. I mailed the form on Tuesday. By Wednesday, Dave Richardson confirmed that our joint account freeze had been processed. Standard procedure, he explained, when one spouse files for separation citing financial misconduct. This immediately halted Danielle's ability to siphon more money or move any remaining assets. Her carefully constructed exit strategy had hit its first real obstacle. She wanted freedom. I gave her silence. But silence isn't the same as inaction. Thursday afternoon, I researched Danielle's employer, McKinsey & Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm that specialized in nonprofit financial management, the kind of company that takes compliance seriously because their clients demand it. I'd met some of her colleagues at company parties over the years. Nice people mostly, the kind who volunteer at charity events and sponsor Little League teams. They wouldn't appreciate learning that one of their employees was moving money offshore while her husband dealt with a family death. I found the company's internal compliance officer through their website, Jennifer Walsh, CPA. Her bio mentioned expertise in financial risk assessment and regulatory compliance. Perfect. I drafted an anonymous email from a Proton Mail account. No accusations, no personal details. Just facts presented as a potential reputation risk. Ms. Walsh, I've become aware of financial activity involving one of your employees that may create compliance concerns for McKinsey & Associates. Employee, Danielle Barrett. Activity? Systematic offshore transfers during a period of family medical crisis. Attached documentation shows $17,100.00 moved to an undisclosed Cayman Islands account while employee had unauthorized access to estate financial records. I thought your firm should be aware of potential liability issues. I attached the same documentation I'd sent to the IRS. Transaction logs, email evidence, bank statements. They didn't need to know the story. Just the liability. Most companies have policies about employees engaging in financial misconduct. Not because they're judgmental, but because they're practical. When you manage other people's money professionally, Your personal financial behavior becomes a business concern. I sent the email Thursday evening and went to bed early. Friday brought complications I hadn't expected. My work email contained a message I definitely hadn't requested. An audit notice from First National Bank, CC'd to my corporate address instead of my personal one. Some junior clerk had mixed up the routing, sending confidential banking correspondence to my employer instead of my home. The notice was routine. Notification that our joint account was under forensic review pending legal proceedings. Standard language, nothing inflammatory. But it was addressed to me at Barrett Medical Devices, where corporate email is monitored for compliance purposes. My supervisor, Karen Mills, forwarded it with a brief note. Michael, hope everything's okay. Let me know if you need any additional leave time. Professional, supportive, confidential. But the damage was done. Banking audit notices don't arrive without reasons. That's when Danielle made her first mistake since Miami. She panicked. Saturday morning brought a certified letter addressed to me personally. Legal letterhead, formal language, aggressive tone. Danielle had hired a lawyer, someone named Robert Chen from a downtown firm I'd never heard of. The letter alleged financial abuse, claimed I'd frozen joint assets to control and manipulate her during a vulnerable time, accused me of using superior financial knowledge to intimidate and isolate her. It was a counterattack designed to shift blame and create doubt, make me look like the aggressor, her like the victim, force me to defend actions that were perfectly legal but might seem vindictive to someone who didn't know the full story. She tried to turn the tide, but the tide had already gone out. Here's what Danielle didn't understand about legal strategy. Sometimes the best response is no response. Sometimes silence is more powerful than argument. I didn't call her lawyer, didn't file a countermotion, didn't defend myself against allegations I knew were false. Instead, I let the systems I'd set in motion continue working. The IRS doesn't care about marital disputes. They care about unreported offshore income. Bank compliance officers don't consider emotions when investigating suspicious transfers. Family court judges don't make decisions based on who files the angriest paperwork. Monday brought confirmation that the systems were working exactly as designed. Jennifer Walsh from McKinsey & Associates sent a brief email to my anonymous Proton Mail account. Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. We are conducting an internal review and will take appropriate action based on our findings. Corporate speak for, we're investigating, and someone's about to have a very uncomfortable conversation with HR. Tuesday brought even better news. Dave Richardson called with an update from family court. Michael, the judge reviewed both filings. Your separation petition is being fast-tracked. The financial evidence you provided is compelling, and the offshore account documentation raises serious questions about her credibility. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Her claim about financial abuse? The judge noted that freezing joint assets pending investigation is standard procedure when misconduct is suspected. There's no merit to her allegations. But the real victory came Wednesday. I was reviewing contracts in my office when my personal phone buzzed, text message from an unknown number. This is Jennifer Walsh at McKinsey & Associates. Could you call me at your earliest convenience regarding documentation you provided? I have some questions about the employee in question. I called from my car during lunch break. Mr. Barrett, she said, recognizing my voice immediately. I wanted to thank you for the information you provided. Our internal investigation confirmed significant concerns about Miss Barrett's financial activities. She couldn't provide details about their internal disciplinary process, but she could confirm that Danielle was being placed on administrative leave pending a full compliance review. When employees engage in questionable financial behavior, especially involving offshore accounts, it creates liability issues for the firm. We take these matters very seriously. Translation: Danielle's career at McKinsey & Associates was over. The beauty of systemic revenge is that you don't have to orchestrate every outcome. You just have to set the right dominoes in motion and let institutional processes do what they're designed to do. The IRS investigates offshore tax violations because that's their job. Banks freeze accounts when misconduct is suspected because that's their protocol. Employers terminate employees who create compliance risks because that's their policy. I didn't force any of these outcomes. I just provided accurate information to the appropriate authorities and let them make their own decisions based on their own standards. By Thursday, the picture was complete. Danielle's Cayman account was frozen pending IRS investigation. Her access to our joint funds was terminated. Her employment was suspended. Her legal counterclaim had been dismissed as baseless. The exit strategy she'd spent weeks building had collapsed in less than a week. And I'd never raised my voice, never made threats, never done anything except document the truth and share it with people whose job it was to act on that kind of information. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply letting someone face the natural consequences of their own choices. She walked in like she still belonged somewhere. That ended in 7 seconds. The wine bar was called Meridian, one of those upscale Charlotte places where consultants meet clients and lawyers celebrate victories. Dark wood, exposed brick, the kind of lighting that makes everyone look successful. I wasn't there by accident. Dave Richardson had called that morning with interesting information. Danielle was meeting with a potential new employer, a firm that specialized in international nonprofit consulting. They'd reached out to her through LinkedIn, impressed by her experience at McKinsey & Associates. What they didn't know was that McKinsey had placed her on administrative leave 3 days earlier. She's trying to jump ship before it sinks, Dave explained. Classic move when someone's facing compliance issues, get hired somewhere new, then claim any negative references or retaliation from a bitter ex-husband. Smart strategy. Might have worked if I hadn't spent 2 weeks documenting every detail of her offshore activities. I arrived at Meridian 15 minutes early and chose a corner table with clear sightlines to the entrance. The man sitting across from me looked nervous. Understandable, given what he was about to witness. Alan Green had flown in from Miami that morning, financial compliance officer for Revolut's Caribbean operations, retained by my legal team to provide expert testimony about offshore account structuring. Mid-50s, thin, the kind of pale complexion that comes from spending too much time reviewing transaction logs. "Mr. Barrett," he said, opening a manila folder, "I've reviewed the account activity you provided. The patterns are concerning." Alan explained the technicalities in language I could understand. Systematic deposits just under reporting thresholds. Immediate currency conversions to avoid transaction tracking. Geographic routing through multiple jurisdictions to complicate investigation. "Your wife demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of financial concealment techniques," he said. "This wasn't impulsive behavior. This was planned structuring." The folder in his hands contained 18 months of forensic analysis. Every transaction, every routing number, every digital fingerprint Danielle had left while building her escape fund. At 6:23 p.m., she walked through the front door. She looked confident, professional, wearing the navy suit she reserved for important meetings, her hair pulled back in the style she called executive appropriate. She scanned the dining room, probably looking for her interview contact. Her eyes swept past the bar, past the corner booths, past... She froze when she saw me. Not because I was there, because of who was sitting beside me. Alan Green wasn't supposed to exist in her world. He was a detail from her secret life, a name on compliance documents she'd hoped no one would ever trace. But there he was, calm and professional, holding a folder with her name on it. The wine glass slipped from her hand before she'd taken a single step into the restaurant. Crystal hit tile with a sound like breaking ice. Sharp, final, echoing in the sudden silence that followed. Every conversation in the restaurant paused. Waiters turned. The hostess stepped forward with a concerned expression and a dustpan. Danielle didn't move, didn't apologize, didn't even look down at the mess she'd made. She was staring at Alan like he was a ghost she'd thought she'd buried. "Mr. Barrett," Alan said, standing and extending his hand in a gesture of professional courtesy, "I believe we have some matters to discuss." She turned and walked out without a word. The hostess cleaned up the broken glass while Alan and I finished our drinks. He'd accomplished what he came to do: deliver official notice that her Cayman account was frozen pending federal investigation. "She can't access the $17,000, he confirmed. "The account is locked until the IRS completes their review. Could take months, possibly years." The next morning brought official confirmation of what I'd been expecting. The IRS had launched a civil audit of Danielle's tax returns for the past 3 years. Their initial findings showed significant discrepancies between reported income and observed financial activity. Unreported offshore accounts are a federal crime. Not the kind that sends soccer moms to prison, but the kind that results in substantial penalties, frozen assets, and years of financial scrutiny. Her employer, now her former employer, had also taken action. Jennifer Walsh from McKinsey & Associates sent a brief email confirming that Danielle's employment had been terminated, citing reputational risk during an ongoing internal ethics inquiry. Corporate speak for, "We don't employ people who hide money offshore while their husbands bury their fathers." Dave Richardson called with updates from family court. The separation was being formalized under North Carolina law, with all properties affirmed as separate assets based on our prenuptial agreement. "The judge was particularly impressed by the trust documentation," Dave explained. "Your father's foresight in protecting family assets made this straightforward. She has no claim to the house, the inheritance, or any trust property. The house she'd lived in for 14 years was no longer her home. The financial security she'd taken for granted was no longer available. The career she'd built over 2 decades was no longer accessible. Her carefully planned exit strategy had become a free fall. But the most satisfying reversal came 3 days later. I was reviewing contracts at my office when my assistant brought in a certified mail receipt. The return address was familiar: the law firm handling Dad's estate. Inside was a single document: formal notification of trust modification. The language was precise, legal, final. "Danielle James Barrett is hereby removed from any current or future Barrett family trust instruments, effective immediately. This modification is irrevocable and supersedes any previous documentation suggesting potential inheritance rights or beneficiary status." The document was signed by the trust administrator, notarized, and filed with the appropriate county offices. Official record that she would never benefit from anything Dad had built or I would inherit. It wasn't delivered by anyone dramatic. No process server, no lawyer in an expensive suit. Just a routine certified letter that arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, like tax documents or insurance updates. But the message was clear. She'd chosen to exclude herself from our family while Dad was dying. Now she was officially excluded from our family forever. That evening, I sat in the same kitchen chair where I'd read her flight confirmation to Miami 3 weeks earlier. The house felt different now. Not empty, peaceful. The joint bank account was closed. The offshore money was frozen. The separation was finalized. The trust was protected. Every financial thread connecting us had been severed with the same precision she'd used to plan her escape. She'd wanted freedom from our marriage, our responsibilities, our shared life. She'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for. She just hadn't expected freedom to cost everything she'd planned to take with her. The irony was almost perfect. She'd spent weeks positioning herself financially for a new life, only to discover that stealing money requires keeping access to it. Frozen accounts don't fund fresh starts. I looked out the kitchen window at the driveway where her car used to park. Empty now, like everything else she'd left behind. But emptiness isn't the same as loss. Sometimes it's just space for something better to grow. The certified letter sat on the counter beside me, official proof that some choices can't be undone. Some bridges, once burned, stay burned forever. She'd lit the match herself. I just made sure she couldn't escape the fire. The storage unit smelled like cedar and coal dust. His box was still there. Unit 247 at Charlotte Self Storage had been Dad's secret for 30 years. Not secret like an affair or hidden debt. Secret like a backup plan. A place where important things waited until they were needed. I'd found the key in his desk drawer the week after the funeral, attached to a note that simply said, "When you're ready." No instructions, no explanations, just trust that I'd know what ready meant. 3 weeks later, standing in the doorway of a 10 by 10 concrete room, I understood. Most of Dad's belongings had been distributed to family or donated to charity. The storage unit held only what mattered, a cedar box sitting alone on a metal shelf, surrounded by empty space that used to contain a lifetime of accumulated memories. The box was older than I remembered. Handmade, with joints that spoke of careful craftsmanship and brass hinges that had aged to a deep patina. Dad's initials were carved into the lid. WB for William Barrett. William Barrett, who'd built a medical device company from nothing, who'd raised a son alone after Mom died, who'd somehow known his daughter-in-law would choose betrayal over loyalty when the moment came to choose. I lifted the lid. Inside were 3 items, each placed with the deliberate care Dad brought to everything important. A faded Polaroid, edges soft with age. The picture showed me as a child, maybe 6 years old, asleep on Dad's chest while he read in his favorite chair. My small hand was curled against his shirt. His hand rested on my back, protective even in sleep. 2 silver cufflinks, heavy and simple, no engravings, no decorative flourishes, the kind worn by men who understood that quality doesn't require ornamentation. A letter, written in Dad's careful handwriting, on stationery I recognized from his desk. Michael, it began, if you're reading this, then someone chose noise over substance. Someone chose taking over building. Someone chose betrayal over loyalty. I've watched people make these choices my entire life. The pattern never changes. If she ever chooses noise, you stay quiet. Let silence do the work. The cufflinks were your grandfather's. He wore them through the Depression, through war, through starting over when everything seemed lost. They're yours now. Not because I'm gone, but because you understand their weight. Love, Dad. I held the cufflinks up to the fluorescent light. They caught the brightness and reflected it back, steady and unchanging. I put on the cufflinks. They didn't fit at first, but they do now. The metal was warm against my skin, not just from my body heat, but from some deeper recognition. These had been worn by men who'd faced difficult choices and made them quietly, who'd built things that lasted, who'd protected what mattered, without making speeches about it. I folded the letter and put it back in the box with a photograph. Some things are meant to be kept, not displayed. The drive home took me past McKinsey & Associates, where Danielle's office window was dark, past the bank where our joint account had been closed, past the courthouse where our separation had been finalized. None of it mattered anymore. At home, I found the last wedding photo in the drawer where I'd kept the prenup. Danielle and me, young and optimistic, cutting cake while relatives cheered in the background. I carried it to the backyard and placed it in the small iron bowl I used for burning yard debris. No ritual, no ceremony. No dramatic speeches to an empty yard. Just flame. The photograph curled and blackened, releasing smoke that smelled like chemicals and lost time. I watched until it was ash, then stirred the remains with a stick until nothing recognizable remained. The morning air was cool against my face. Spring was arriving early this year. The dogwood trees were budding, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear construction beginning on a new development. I touched the cufflinks at my wrists and stepped inside to make coffee. No longer waiting for peace, just walking through it.